Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 5 in my reaction to Raquel's interview on the podcast with Bethany Frankel. I want to remind everyone that I didn't realize there was a video version. I ended up reacting to the audio version on Sunshinery's YouTube channel. Let's listen.
Okay, so what are your regrets? Like, what would you do differently?
Okay, so this will be interesting to hear her response to this, because this is an open invitation to acknowledge what she did. So let's see what happens.
I regret a lot. I would do everything differently if I had the chance to go back. And I really just want to acknowledge that a lot of people were believing in me, and I feel like I was a disappointment to those people. I know that there was a lot of trust that was broken between friendships.
Okay, that's good. So this phrase that people use in public statements, and I guess in real life, where people say, I want to acknowledge. And yeah, that's good. But I feel like it's a way for people to distance themselves from their behavior sometimes, or distance themselves from the transgression. It's one thing to say, if you're Raquel, I acknowledge what I did was wrong and the hurt that I caused in other people, and I feel really bad about it. There's no excuse for it, and no one's to blame except for me, and I feel really bad. Okay, that's one version. That's the good version of acknowledging. But sometimes in these public statements, people say, I acknowledge that other people are really angry at me. I acknowledge that people are really hurt by what I did. And then they don't really demonstrate, the speaker doesn't demonstrate that the other elements that I mentioned earlier, of just the remorse and the feeling bad and I did this to you. Because the Will Smith apology video is kind of along these lines of, I take full responsibility and I acknowledge that I did these things, But without following it up with, I did this to you and I feel bad about that. I acknowledge that I hurt you really bad, which is understandable. Without saying those things, it makes me wonder if this acknowledgement is a true acknowledgement of what happened, or just stating a fact, just in a cold way to say, I acknowledge that a lot of people don't trust me anymore. I mean, she has a tone of voice that seems like she is saying that she understands why people would feel that way about her, but I don't know. Let's see what else she says.
And betrayal that happened, and I look back at my actions and I'm disappointed in myself as well. That is not the person that I want to be. That I wasn't happy. I was really hurting.
Okay. So I guess as a professional listener, I have noted certain patterns of how people will progress as they talk. And she started off because she was given this open invitation to acknowledge what she did. And the first place she went was the trust of friends. And I think she's referring to Ariana and other people that were also very hurt by what Tom and Raquel did. So that's good. She didn't really nail the landing there, but it seemed like she was going in the direction of, I understand why they feel that way and I feel bad for it. She could have done better by emphasizing that. But then as she's talking, she starts to engage in this self-justification or self-centeredness. She was asked, what would you do differently? I didn't expect her to say anything like this, but you would hope that someone in her position would say, well, to be specific, when I first noticed, and I'd been drinking that first night when Tom and I got together that first time, but I did have a thought in my head of just like, whoa, so what's happening right now? This is my friend, two of my friends, Tom and Ariana, and so if I continue to entertain this pathway, I think Tom and I are going to get together, and there's major consequences of that. And I did acknowledge that in the moment, but I went ahead with it anyway. And I have my reasons as to why I went into denial in that moment. I was desperate. She mentioned earlier that Tom really made her feel seen and heard. And I think that's probably attributable to him putting on his best face, putting on his, I'm going to seduce her, or, I mean, not like Machiavellian, but because Tom doesn't come across to me as someone that has the maturity to really listen in an altruistic, compassionate, empathetic way. I don't know that, obviously, but I just can't imagine, given what we know about Tom, do we think that he's this amazing listener? And maybe for a time he can be that way. Now, I don't doubt that it was real, that Raquel did feel heard and understood or something. But anyway, so she could have said, and you would just hope that someone with everything that happened, that she would say, if I could go back in time, I would not have entertained that path. I would have said, hey, I'm going to go home, or hey, let's just talk. I don't want to get physical with you. So she could have done that again, just in that one night. She could have made 1,000 or, let's say within reason, 150 different decisions in a different way, such that she wouldn't have gotten together with him, while still retaining a friendship that felt good to her, and maybe entertaining the beginning of a romantic relationship. Maybe if they continue to connect, she goes on a campaign to say, hey, I feel like there's something going on here. I don't know, but you need to work out your relationship with Ariana. And I'm just going to tell you, just throwing it out there, that if you wanted to maybe date and see how compatible we are, after you break up with Ariana, I'm just going to put that out there as an invitation, but only after you break up with Ariana. And maybe there would be some sort of waiting period of a few months or 6 months or something, and then we could date after that point. I think some people might consider that to be pretty sneaky and shady as well, because you're propositioning someone in a relationship. But, that would be a lot better than what. So you just think she would say, I would wish in that moment, and then I wish several other moments after Tom and I got together that I turned the car around and said, no, I'm in love with you, but you have to break up with Ariana and then we can be together. But until then, we can't do this anymore because it's wrong. It's wrong. I feel bad. I'm lying to everybody. I'm lying to myself, and I can't do this. I'm sorry. Deal with your relationship. You would think that she would say something like that. Or I wish that a year prior to Tom and I getting together, I wish I would, or whenever she was going through the troubles emotionally, I wish I would have gone to therapy then and really worked on what I was going through, so I wasn't so vulnerable in that moment. Yeah. Instead, she briefly talks about the pain that she put people through, and then very quickly, and what it reveals is the narrative and the way she thinks about the situation. People will track their words and their sentences, the direction they go, and as they talk, because they're searching their mind and thinking of relevant things to say based on the last thing they said. And if she is frequently engaging in defensive things, like saying I was justified and Ariana, it takes three to tango, that kind of stuff, then it will be revealed in the way that she is tracking as she progresses in her statements. As therapists, we're trained to actually follow that. It doesn't always mean something, but it is something to pay attention to. When you're just listening to a friend, you're not usually doing that, right? But as a professional, we're trying to assess things and trying to figure things out. And that is one way that's one of the 1,000 different angles that you can pay attention to gain more insight into what's going on with the client. So we hear her, let's rewind that.
And betrayal that happened. And I look back at my actions and I'm disappointed in myself as well. That is not the person that I want to be. So
given where she's headed, that statement, I believe, is that defense of that wasn't me. It's this denial of I did this thing. It's just like, that's this other person. I'm disappointed in that person too. And that's just not me. And I don't recommend that she think of it that way. She can certainly say there's a part of me that I'm still wrestling with, that I have to investigate and figure out and process. But to say that wasn't me, I think is a trick she's playing on herself because of the pain I think that she's going through, so that she can just move on with her life and not have to face her issues.
I wasn't happy. I was really hurting. I don't ever want to be in a place like that again. And I will make sure that I don't put myself in that position again. I think there is a silver lining in the situation.
So again, the question was, what would you have done differently? And she still hasn't really mentioned anything specific that she would do differently. It's this broad statement of that's not me. And I acknowledge that other people are hurt by me. And then very quickly, it's what she's saying of that, I'm not going to do it again. And I don't think that's, now, might she never have a cheating incident again? It's possible, but whatever problem generated, or the set of problems that generated the compulsion or the drive or the behavior is probably still present. Now, maybe she's addressing that. I don't know. I can't really tell. But if I were Ariana and I heard this, I'd say, there we go. Because again, all she has to say is, I lied to Ariana countless times, and I feel bad about that. Of course, Ariana is hurt and angry at me. And if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have done it. You just think she would say something like that. But the way that this whole interview was going, it reveals that she just isn't there yet. Let's just put it that way.
I think there is a silver lining in the situation, that I'm able to learn about myself and give myself this forgiveness, and hopefully share with other people the knowledge that I've learned, and help to broaden a perspective on all of these things that have happened and that I've experienced.
Yeah, sounds nice. But if I didn't know anything about the situation, or I was naive or something, given what she says, what lessons is she proposing for people to learn from her situation? Because I think what I would be learning from her example is that you try to find any excuse to justify your behavior. They went into a lot of talk about how the show mistreated her, and they kind of forced her to endure the verbal abuse. And sure, you could absolutely highlight that. Reality TV shows are very exploitative because it makes them money, and they were acknowledging that. But that's completely, and absolutely indict away the show. But that's independent of what you did, So that was just one example. There's a lot of other examples that I've been over, but the lesson is that you just distance yourself. You go to inpatient, and then you distance yourself from your behavior and say, that's not me, and I'm just never going to do it again. And I just have to say, it's one of the most destructive plans or perspectives that people exhibit so often in life, where they commit a transgression, they say, oh, that was bad that I did that. Well, I'm just never going to do it again. And there are some situations where that might work out, but 99% of the time, it will not work out. Just saying to yourself, oh, duly noted, I won't do that again. Especially these sorts of things. I mean, maybe infidelity won't be done again by Raquel, but the disregard for other people's feelings, the desperation leading to self-destruction, those things are very likely to happen again. I can't know that. I can't predict the future, but I can't tell you how many times I would hear that from people in my life or clients, and then I would learn later that didn't help. Just saying to yourself, I'm just never going to do it again. Now, I don't fault people entirely, because our society does a pretty bad job of helping people understand that there are other avenues of actually assuring that you won't do it again, or mitigating the factors that led to that behavior. You know, we're not particularly great about advocating for therapy. I mean, we're better now, but not great. And even what is done in therapy sometimes isn't really along these lines, you know, because some therapists, their style isn't really to go down these roads, you know. Their style might literally be just commit yourself to never doing this again. You have to acknowledge what you did and just commit yourself to never do it again. Okay, job done. Let's move on in life. Yeah, so there's not a lot of options for people. And, you know, I get that, but it's upsetting because, one, just to watch people self-destruct without taking actions to avoid that. But also just me, you know, people will harm me repeatedly along these lines. And if they even manage to acknowledge that they did those things, which is not always the case, obviously, often what I will sense or hear is they're just saying, I'm committing to myself I'm never going to do this again. And then selfishly, I just wish people didn't do that, right? So now, have I done it? Yeah, I'm sure I have. I'm not some superhuman, but I strive not to.
A perspective on all of these things that have happened and that I've experienced. And if somebody is going through a similar situation, that there's still hope.
I think I lost the thread. A similar situation of you doing something that was wrong and harmful, and then you have consequences afterwards. You know, all the consequences that she experienced were not above board. The attacking, particularly among the public, she was talking about death threats, which I don't doubt happened, and that's not justified. But her, upon being asked, remember, she's asked, what would you do differently? Her main thesis here is there's a silver lining, which is an interesting way of looking at it, and saying that she wants to be inspirational to people, to tell them that there's hope. What hope for what exactly? Hope. I don't understand. I think the way she's framing it, and this interviewer is definitely along these lines, is saying that she was a victim of this whole thing. Now, was she victimized? Yeah, after the fact, but she certainly wasn't a victim during the affair. So she is, I think, saying that she's been victimized by multiple venues, not only the cast, the show, public, that kind of thing. And you can rise above it. I want to give people hope. Wow. Now, if you had that as an asterisk to the overall statement of, I did something that was very harmful, and I knew it was harmful, and I kept doing it, and it did cause a lot of harm, and I feel very bad about that, Asterisks, I also want to acknowledge that I was victimized, and I want to be inspirational to people that redemption is okay. Yeah, okay. But in the absence of that first part, it's, yikes.
Honestly, it was all for something. It was not for naught. I mean, it was a.
And then it makes me wonder about Bethany Frankel because of her bias or perspective. Now, I didn't include these clips, but she talked about how she didn't watch Vanderpump, and then I think she was saying, maybe it was like me, maybe she just watched the bits that I saw. Well, even if she didn't watch much of it, it does raise this question as to what's going on with Bethany Frankel. As another reality TV personality, has she experienced that victimization and is over-focused on Raquel and that aspect of what Raquel went through? Because that's real. Raquel was victimized. That's not the whole story, right? And so I think it's possible that, and I've been there myself. Some of you might even recognize that in my reactions. I'll focus on a particular part because of my own relational traumas or something. So it just raises questions, because the way Bethany sees this, it certainly isn't the way that I've never heard anyone, and I don't have that much experience with the reaction to Vanderpump, but the bit that I do, I certainly have never heard the perspective that Bethany is putting out there. So it is particular. Does anyone know anything along those lines about Bethany's history that would give her this bias? I don't know.
Rough journey, but it got you to an awakening.
Yeah. Well, I needed to get caught. I needed to, because it would have just continued. And that's not who I want to be. This was the biggest wake up call for me.
Yeah. You hit rock bottom, beyond.
Yes. Yeah.
So would you ever?
Okay, that's promising, that language. And I wonder if that illuminates something that is not being focused on in this interview. But that's the first time I've heard, after, I don't know, an hour or two of them talking, where it sounds like she's acknowledging what happened. But unless there's follow-up, it's hard to know what she meant by that.
Yes. Yeah.
So would you ever go back to reality television?
Oh, hell no.
Never.
No, because I refuse to not respect myself on that level where.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I can't imagine that it would be an overall good thing, but I don't know. And if anyone came to me and said, hey, I'm being offered to be on this reality TV show, I would advise that they not, because you just have no control. I think everyone who goes on reality television believes that they're going to be the hero, but there's always a villain. There's always a number of villains that are created by the edit, or you don't realize the flaws that will be revealed when you're pushed to the limit on these shows. People will sometimes, in the comments section below, they'll be like, oh, it'd be great if you were the host of the reunions of this show or that show, or it'd be great if you could be a therapist for these cast members and you could be on the show and then they could show the therapy. And in the beginning, I thought, certainly flattering to hear that. And in the beginning, when I started watching reality TV on YouTube 3.5 years ago, I was thinking, oh yeah, maybe that's in my future. I don't know. Maybe that's the progression of this whole thing. I don't know. I don't know how that works. But the more I watched these shows, the more I learned or acquired the position that I will never go on these shows.
That emotional abuse any longer. I can't do that to myself.
That's a big statement, because it's very tempting. Fame is tempting. Money is tempting. Chasing the dragon is tempting. That's a very big statement, because I would have bet that you would have gone back. And I'm actually proud of you. I don't even know you, but I'm proud of you, because it's not as easy. You are in the spotlight. You could go back and redeem yourself and be famous.
Yeah, that's the typical course, right? And yeah, that is available to her. You would imagine that they would have offered it to her because of the amount of money that they could make by having all three of them on the show, Ariana and Tom and Raquel. And you could imagine being Raquel and thinking, well, at least if I'm on the show long enough, maybe I can redeem myself in some way. But yeah, it would be hard to walk into the lion's den given the way everyone hates her on the show, right? It'd be a hard thing to convince oneself to do so. But usually people will choose fame and fortune over their own self-interest. So good for her for refraining from that.
So you don't want that. And have they asked you to come back?
Yeah, of course. Of course they want me back. And I know that other people on the cast are more important than I am. So I don't even think that I would get a redemption arc, to be honest. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's smart too, to say, well, what story is the show going to emphasize, and what story will the cast members, because they're all working together, whether explicitly at times or implicitly, on creating a story that would be interesting. And for her to predict this, there's not a lot of incentive for anyone to allow me to redeem myself. Now, I would say long term, it would be within the show's interest, I would think, and I don't know, but I would think that the show, say, at the end of the next season, if she were on it, that there would be some flip, because the shows like this, it's the same as soap operas. If you ever watch a soap opera or a show that's like a soap opera, you could say Game of Thrones had one of my favorite series of books of all time. has a similar thing. Jamie's this evil guy, and then he has a redemption. It's a common story that will be told and is apparently told because it's very interesting to watch, right? So it's possible that if she endured it long enough, that the show would be motivated eventually to have a redemption. Because imagine in a couple seasons that Ariana is the villain and Raquel is the hero. Shows would like that because they would want change and controversy. But you couldn't guarantee that to yourself if you're Raquel, and you would have to endure a lot building up to that.
In considering coming back, did you consider coming back at all?
Yeah, I did. I asked for equal pay with Tom and Ariana and for them to reimburse me for my treatment expenses. They refused to pay me equally. And, I was considering going back if I was going to be paid equally because...
Well, that kind of throws it all out the window, right? So it sounds like she was willing if they paid her enough, but they said, we're not going to pay you that much. And then she said, well, then I don't want to do it. So which one is it? That you have this integrity that dictates that you wouldn't go back on, even if you were paid? Or is it that you just were upset that they weren't going to pay you more than what you wanted? And I don't know. But it is interesting that, and who knows if this is accurate, but I could see this happening. She says, I want to get paid the same as Tom and Ariana. And the show says, no, we're not going to do that. And I mean, I don't know how these sort of things work, but I could see them. You'd think they would, actually. You think the show would go, this is going to be a gold mine. Yes, absolutely. We'll pay you the same amount because this is going to make us so much money anyway. Because it's not like Raquel was asking for 10 times what Tom, it was just equal pay. So, okay. But you could also see the show saying, well, it doesn't make sense that you would be paid as much because you're not as much of a veteran, and the way that you act on camera isn't as compelling as Tom and Ariana. So, we don't want to, you could imagine that there was some sort of justification there, but that is interesting. You'd think they would have, given how huge the show would have been. And maybe it'll happen, because by the time they start shooting, maybe it'll get turned around and the show will offer her or strike a deal with her. But anyway, when she said that, I'm like, wait, so you just got done saying that you would never go on because you don't want to go through the abuse and you respect yourself too much, but apparently there's a price to that.
I feel like when you pay your employees, it really shows how much you value them in, the whole, whatever it is.
I get it. You feel like at least I took a hit, but...
All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.